置いてるその卑しい仕込めを。
に何か言ったら殺す。
My Happy Marriage Season 2 Episode 1 begins with a dream sequence, where Miyo witnesses a foreboding moment with Kiyoka Kudo. As the warmth of the spring changes to the barren fall, Miyo's life turns melancholic. On a snowy night, Kiyoka apologizes to Miyo and mentions how much he loves him. The nightmare wakes up Miyo in a cold sweat, and she begins to wonder about its implications. Following that, the narrative for My Happy Marriage Season 2 Episode 1 shows Miyo describing the dream to Arata Yusaba and Kiyoka Kudo. She wonders whether something has happened, but Kiyoka and Arata assure her that nothing dangerous has transpired. Kiyoka also admonishes Arata for not filling them, he and Miyo, about the dream sight ability. Arata doesn't mind Kiyoka's hurt that much. Rather, assures Miyo that he will support her until her powers fully awaken. Likewise, Kiyoka feels his fiancé will eventually find out the meaning behind her dreams one day if she keeps working hard. In a monologue, Miyo Samori says she has never thought about comprehending her dreams. However, she knows that she's the only one in the world with the dream sight ability. Following the opening sequence, My Happy Marriage Season 2 Episode 1 switches to the town, where Hazuki, Miyo and Kiyoka are seen returning from shopping. Miyo, who has bought a nice dress, thanks Hazuki for accompanying her. Just then, she gets an intense feeling that someone is watching her. The cold sensation almost overwhelms her before someone touches her from behind. Miyo quickly turns around and notices a familiar-looking person. The elderly person happens to be Kikuo Kudo's father, Tadakio Kudo. Miyo Samori's meek and gentle behavior pleases Tadakio. He holds her hands as if approving of her as his would-be daughter-in-law. Kiyoka is slightly embarrassed by his father's act. He asks why he has arrived. Tadakio Kudo then says he has come to invite them both, Kiyoka and Miyo, to the Kudo family's villa. The narrative for My Happy Marriage Season 2 Episode 1 then switches to a well-furnished cafe, where Tadakio sips a cup of tea and mentions how much he wanted to see Miyo earlier. However, Kiyoka didn't allow him to. Meanwhile, Kiyoka Kudo says they won't go to the villa. Tadakio doesn't say anything but rather asks Kiyoka for a favor. He hands him a note, which says that strange grotesquerie incidents have been occurring near the Kido family's neighborhood. As such, the anti-grotesquerie unit will be called in. Yet Tadakio wants his son to investigate since something about the case is bothering him. Kiyoka would have refused his father's request if it wasn't for a letter from Prince Takahito, appointing him to take the same case. Both Kiyoka and Hazuki know their father has perhaps pulled the strings from behind, even though he has been retired from the military a long time back. Meanwhile, Miyo wonders whether it'll be fine for her to accompany his fiancé. However, Kiyoka reminds her that it's better to go than wait for him at their home. The narrative for My Happy Marriage Season 2 Episode 1 skips to Miyo and Kiyoka catching a train to the latter's ancestral villa. Seeing the girl tensed, Kiyoka assures her that she can relax. However, it's not that easy since Miyo hasn't stepped outside her home much. After reaching their destination, Miyo and Kiyoka are greeted by the Kudo family's caretaker and butler, Sasaki. He welcomes the duo and takes them to the villa via car. Meanwhile, a short flashback reveals the nature of the grotesquerie incidents. According to My Happy Marriage Season 2 Episode 1, Kiyoka has been sent on a mission to investigate the sighting of a demon, a special type of grotesquerie, and similar grotesqueries near the imperial border. Additionally, the letter says a suspicious person has been seen in the area. Thus, Kiyoka wants to investigate and see whether such a report is related to the grotesquerie case. Meanwhile, Kiyoka Kudo's homecoming doesn't go pleasant because his mother, Fuyu Kudo, brutally berates Miyo. She wonders whether Miyo is Kiyoka's scruffy attendant. Fuyu Kudo's harsh words toward Miyo infuriate Kiyoka, and his rampant emotions bring thunder outside the villa.
に置いてるその卑しい仕込めを。
He also mentions how he never considered Fuyu as his mother. Meanwhile, Miyo doesn't know what she should do as she clutches onto her fiancé's hand. Fuyu then lashes at Miyo, asking her whether she thinks a lowly abandoned girl can marry the Kudo family's head. Kiyoka Kudo becomes even more furious and is ready to demonstrate his powers. However, his father intervenes and uses his supernatural ability to prevent a battle from brewing. Tadakio reminds Kiyoka and Fuyu that they have a guest.
イオに何か言ったら殺す。
After going upstairs, Kiyoka apologizes to Miyo on behalf of her mother. He knows what type of person she is. Having said that, he's glad to know that Miyo is fine. The narrative moves to Kiyoka Kudo and Miyo Samori taking a walk through the villa's neighborhood. The former mentions how happy Prince Takahito was to hear that they are visiting the place together. He also mentioned how the journey will be a necessary one for Kiyoka and his fiancée. After walking for a while, the duo enters a shop. Miyo Samori is delighted to see handcrafted wooden decorative items, known as classic souvenirs from the place. Seeing Miyo in a thrilled mood, Kiyoka tells her to buy as many as she wants. Meanwhile, the shopkeeper urges Kiyoka to be careful on his way home, since there are disturbing rumors going around the neighborhood about the sighting of a demon. Moreover, a suspicious outsider has been going in and out from the rundown mansion on the village's outskirts. While returning home, Kiyoka and Miyo watch the sunset together in My Happy Marriage Season 2 Episode 1. The former apologizes to Miyo once again because of her mother's harsh words. However, the girl says although she can't change the past, she wants to get along with Fuyu Kudo. As such, she wants her would-be husband to watch over her. Kiyoka smiles and tells Miyo to do whatever she wants. After returning home, the duo enters their room. Miyo Samori is embarrassed to see there's only one bed, so she exits the room to ask someone to prepare another bed. Kiyoka doesn't quite understand why Miyo appeared such flustered.
お布団が一つしかないわ。心の準備が。やっぱり別のお布団をご用意してもらいます。
Following that, the narrative for My Happy Marriage Season 2 Episode 1 switches to Prince Takahito's mansion, where they inform Erita that the Yusuba family's future isn't steady. A threat looms large over the imperial city by someone with Yusuba blood. Although they don't know the nature of the threat, Takahito's revelation ability has told them that only Miyo, the Maiden of Dream Sight, and Erita can prevent the calamity. Thus, Takahito entrusts the future to Erita. After that, Prince Takahito assigns Erita on a mission.
の仕事をしてもらうわ。
お掃除します。やらせてください。
Episode 2 extends Miyo Samori and Kiyoka Kudo facing their respective ordeals head-on. Although Miyo realized that Kiyoka's mother disapproved of her as the better half of the Kudo household's heir, she earnestly devoted herself to getting along with her. Miyo wanted to win Fuyu Kudo's heart since she knew that her fiancé, Kiyoka, needed her. Likewise, Kiyoka Kudo immersed himself in investigating the strange case regarding the demon-shaped grotesquerie sightings. Even though Kiyoka was aware of his mother and Miyo's situation, he had full faith in his fiancée that she would handle the situation perfectly well. Rightly so, My Happy Marriage Season 2 Episode 2 saw Miyo Samori keep a calm front when Kiyoka's mother ordered her to work as a servant at the Kudo household. She wanted to see whether Miyo had the resolve. Fuyu expected Miyo to give up and run away. However, when the girl surpassed her expectations and embraced her orders, she became even more irritated.
お庭のお掃除をお願いいたします。
はい。
Miyo Samori's earnest work won over the Kudo family's caretakers and maids, who apologized to her later because they had initially thought that being a girl from a respected family, she wouldn't be able to do an adequate job. On the other hand, Kiyoka's father, Tadakio Kudo, deeply apologized to Miyo for his wife's rash behavior. Miyo Samori already began to have an influence on others. She lit up the household, something that Fuyu Kudo didn't expect. She couldn't believe a meager-looking girl, she used the phrase in the episode, would do well to become the wife of the Kudo family's heir. Although she knew deep inside that her son, Kiyoka, needed Miyo and that she was the perfect bride for her son, Fuyu still couldn't bring herself to accept the girl. Fuyu Kudo's refusal to accept Miyo partly stemmed from the strong exterior she built throughout the time she spent in the Kudo household, as Tadakio stated toward the end. She perhaps thought Miyo was too soft-hearted for her son. That's why she always made insulting remarks to Miyo without showing any remorse. However, Miyo Samori listened to Fuyu's harsh words without even reacting.
に座れ。が暖かいだろう。
It was only possible because she knew that Kiyoka Kudo watched over her. Miyo's strongest support, Kiyoka, was always behind her back, and it lent her the strength to push on. Although Kiyoka Kudo was busy with the investigation, he was aware of everything. That's why, even though Miyo Samori's ordeal was chiefly hers, Kiyoka Kudo had a deep share in it too. Aside from the major focus on Miyo Samori and Fuyu Kudo's narrative, the episode showcased Kiyoka Kudo grappling with the case he was assigned to. Episode 2, Kiyoka Kudo wanted to get to the bottom of the grotesquerie case in his neighborhood. Notably, Kiyoka Kudo discovered the location of the run-down mansion from one of his neighbors and went inside. He witnessed several vials and other research items, as well as an unusual crest symbol. Kiyoka Kudo realized it was the same symbol he and his team at the Special Anti-Grotesquerie Unit had been trying to figure out. Just then, a mysterious man confronted Kiyoka and demonstrated a special power to self-destruct. Before dying, the man mentioned that the founder had blessed him with such power. Additionally, My Happy Marriage Season 2 Episode 2 implied that the order named Gifted Communion could be behind the whole case. However, on a deeper inspection, it would seem that the case would bring Miyo and Kiyoka together, just as the familial troubles have brought the duo closer. Although neither Miyo nor Kiyoka explicitly disclosed their respective ordeals in the episode, their narratives eventually co-align at the end of the episode, when Miyo decided to use her dream sight powers on a man to save him. Miyo Samori was prepared to die if it meant helping her husband. However, she was stopped midway by Arata Yusaba, who appeared at the Kudo household in My Happy Marriage Season 2 Episode 2's end.
かけられて。
かけられます。
ミオ、やめなさい。
ブラッドさん。旦那様の唇が。
Episode 3 begins with Arata Yusaba reprimanding Miyo Samori for erratically using her powers without anyone's supervision. Meanwhile, Fuyu Kudo demands an answer from Arata regarding his identity and why he barged into their home without permission. Arata sincerely apologizes for his unannounced visit and formally introduces himself. Fuyu is slightly shocked to learn that Arata, a Yusaba blood, is Miyo's cousin. On the other hand, Miyo tells Arata about the man's plight and how he will die if they don't do anything. Arata Yusaba acknowledges Miyo's gesture but reminds her she shouldn't recklessly demonstrate her powers. That said, he also thinks they need Miyo's powers to save the man. Yet, since Miyo can't use her abilities to their fullest, Arata wants to stand by her side and watch over her. Assured, Miyo then dives into the man's consciousness. Elsewhere in My Happy Marriage, Kiyoka Kudo heads to the village's outskirts to find the demon. Along the way, he meets a few villagers who inform him about the demon's sightings at the rundown mansion. As Kiyoka reaches the mansion, he encounters a suspicious man in a cloak, who tells him about the Gifted Communion's goal. The Gifted Communion desires to give powers to those without supernatural abilities to eradicate the pervading inequality in the land. The suspicious man reveals how their order has liberated many people with their blessings. Since only a select few share the knowledge of supernatural abilities and the grotesqueries in the distorted world, they assume omnipotent control over others. Following the vision of the founder Naoshi Yujui, the Gifted Communion wants to create a truly equal world. Through informing Kiyoka about their clan's goal, the suspicious man invites Kiyoka to join their cause. When Kiyoka Kudo refuses, the gift user summons a giant demon which emerges from the ruined mansion. Besides the demon, two cloaked individuals appear alongside it. Just then, Tadakio Kudo joins the fray. Although Kiyoka asks his father to leave everything to him, Tadakio wants to battle. He takes on the cloaked individuals while Kiyoka fights the giant fiend. Tadakio Kudo demonstrates his impressive combat prowess, combined with his skillful display of ice-based supernatural abilities, to incapacitate the enemies. Likewise, Kiyoka Kudo unleashes a powerful fire-type attack to defeat the demon. While inspecting the demon, Kiyoka and Tadakio discover the creature turning into a human. The man is wearing a vial containing blood with ominous energy. Kiyoka Kudo wonders whether the man turned into a demon by indigesting the blood. The narrative for My Happy shifts to Miyo Samori, who enters Kota's subconscious mind to help him. She notices the man sitting helplessly, with a protruding horn on his head. As Miyo holds the man, the horn seemingly disappears. However, a demonic hand suddenly begins to plunge the man into eternal darkness. Miyo becomes helpless as she doesn't know what to do. However, her resolve to save the man illuminates the dream world as the demonic hand disappears. After saving the man in the dream world, Miyo returns to her senses. With tears, Kota's mother expresses her gratitude to Miyo for saving her daughter. Just then, in My Happy Marriage, Kiyoka Kudo returns to the Kudo household, and he's glad to see that his fiancée is doing fine. Following that, Kiyoka notices Arata and asks him his reason for the visit. Arata says Prince Takahito has personally asked him to visit the Kudo mansion to investigate a suspicious organization near the vicinity. Kiyoka Kudo then informs Arata about the gifted communion, including the vial he found and the order's founder's name, Naoshi Yusaba. As soon as he hears Naoshi's name, Arata's face turns pale. According to My Happy Marriage season, Naoshi Yujui shares the same Yusaba blood as Arata and Miyo. In other words, he's from the branch family. Night, Arata informs Kiyoka and Miyo that Naoshi Yusaba was born into the Yujui family, Yusaba's branch family. One day, he disappeared from the face of the earth. Arata adds that Yujui has Yusaba's supernatural ability, and he was Miyo's mother, Sumi Samori's prospective fiancé. However, after Sumi was married off to the Samori, he broke ties with the Yusaba family and left. Arata fears that if Naoshi leads the gifted communion, the root of all the related crimes lies in the Yusaba family. At any rate, he decides to report the matter to Prince Takahito. After Arata leaves, Miyo Samori realizes the incident regarding Naoshi Yujui matters to her since she has the Yusaba blood in her veins. Kiyoka, who understands how much Miyo is going through, tells her not to worry. He promises to do what she can't and leave what she should to her. Kiyoka wants to live with Miyo, where they help and cover for each other. He thinks they can manage anything as a married couple that way. Miyo then asks Kiyoka whether she's giving him adequate support as his fiancé. Kiyoka smiles and tells Miyo she has already become someone without whom he could not live a long time ago. Kiyoka Kudo's kind words brighten Miyo's. Under the moonlit night, Kiyoka and Miyo share their first proper kiss. The moment brings the duo closer, as Miyo forgets to blink seeing her lover's bright moonlit smile. Miyo promises to cherish the moment, which feels like an eternity. The next day, Miyo Samori recalls her first kiss with Kiyoka Kudo while she packs her clothes to return to the Imperial City. Just then, in My Happy Marriage, Kudo enters Miyo's room. Kiyoka's mother finally has a change of heart as she acknowledges Miyo's spirit to act on her fiancé's behalf to save a man's life. Even though she still calls her ugly, unmannered, and other derogatory terms, Kudo finally acknowledges Miyo as her son's would-be bride. In the hallway, she tells Kiyoka to teach Miyo not to be so timid the next time she visits. Kiyoka's face brightens up, realizing that his mother has approved of Miyo. Elsewhere, Yoshito Goto and others from the Special Anti-Grotesquerie Unit gather near a house, hoping to find some members of the Gifted Communion. However, as they enter the house, they find no one except the Order's flag. Suddenly, the house's door closes automatically, and a magic circle appears under Yoshito's feet. Meanwhile, Arata, Kiyoka, and Miyo are at the station. Kiyoka plans to head off to the military station, while Arata will send Miyo home and report his findings to Prince Takahito. Just then, Miyo Samori, Kiyoka Kudo, and Arata Yusaba's senses become dull as a man approaches them. My Happy Marriage Season 2 Episode 3 ends with Naoshi Yujui's arrival, as he addresses Miyo as his daughter.
ミヨ僕の娘
Kiyoka Kudo, Miyo Samori, and Arata Yusaba's unsettling encounter with Naoshi Yujui, the Gifted Communion's founder. Kiyoka urges Miyo to stand back, while Arata points his gun at the man. Naoshi tells them not to get violent as he has only arrived to greet them. Suddenly, he disappears from Arata's view and appears behind Miyo. Naoshi addresses Miyo as his daughter and says he will find her again. Meanwhile, Kiyoka uses his supernatural ability at Naoshi. Yet, moments after that, he realizes there's nobody there. Meanwhile, Miyo Samori wonders why Naoshi Yujui addressed her as his daughter. The narrative for My Happy Marriage Season 2 Episode 4 then switches to the Special Anti-Grotesquerie Unit's headquarters, where Kiyoka learns about Yoshito Goto's operation at the Gifted Communion's base. Yoshito and his group have sustained heavy injuries due to a trap. As such, Yoshito will be out of action for 2 months. To cover his absence, Karakoko Januchi, a female officer from the old capital, has joined the team. Karakoko says she looks forward to the job. On the other hand, Kiyoka Kudo reads a report about the man he encountered at the rundown mansion. He learns that the man belongs to the Hojo clan. Kiyoka is surprised at how the man could slip through the ministry's surveillance to assist the Gifted Communion. In fact, there's no evidence of a security breach. What's more, no one in the ministry suspected the Hojo member to be missing. Kiyoka surmises that they must be dealing with someone with the power to interfere with one's heart and mind. Just then in My Happy Marriage Season 2 Episode 4, Miyo Samori enters the office accompanied by Arata Yusaba. The squad leaders are slightly anxious to see the 2 members of the Yusaba family, fearing what would happen if they interfere with their psyche. Meanwhile, Kiyoka Kudo asks Arata about Naoshi Yujui's powers. Naoshi Yujui can interfere with 5 senses, i.e. sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. In other words, he can control how one's brain receives information. Arata further says how Naoshi can easily infiltrate the headquarters without anyone noticing if he desired it. Although it's an unnerving ability, Arata knows there must be a weakness. Given its immense power, it can take a heavy toll on Naoshi's body. At the same time, he speculates that there must be a range to his ability. At any rate, the unit considers Naoshi a potential threat. Besides, they know that the Gifted Communion wants to create an equal world where everyone is endowed with supernatural abilities. Kiyoka Kudo speculates that Naoshi Yujui might come after Miyo Samori, considering she has the Dream Sight ability, which can be the key to his vision. Hence, Kiyoka has asked Miyo Samori to come to the quarters from the next day for her protection. My Happy Marriage Season 2 Episode 4 then shows Kiyoka Kudo assigning Karakoko Januchi as Miyo Samori's bodyguard. He urges her to look after Miyo since she could be in danger. Karakoko Januchi takes a liking to Miyo Samori, who's of the same age as her. Since she has been assigned as her bodyguard, Karakoko wants to get along with Miyo and become friends. She even shows her around the quarters, including the kitchen, the commissary, and the dojo. Karakoko saves the dojo as the final stop of the tour since it's her favorite place. She explains to Miyo that her family runs a dojo. Ever since she was a child, Karakoko spent a lot of time training with them. That's why she finds it relaxing at the dojo. Following that, squad leader Mukadiyama greets Miyo. He asks Karakoko to spar with a new recruit and takes care of Miyo for the time being. As Karakoko spars with a boy, Mukadiyama tells Miyo how women are always looked at as a liability in the barracks. That's why Karakoko Januchi, despite her amazing talents, hasn't had a steady promotion. In fact, she was only able to join because of her ability, since it's rare to find a soldier with special abilities. Karakoko Januchi's resilience amazes Miyo Samori, who wonders whether she can also overcome her challenges like her. Meanwhile, Karakoko easily defeats the new recruit, who is disgusted at himself for losing to a woman. My Happy Marriage Season 2 Episode 4 then switches to Arata Yusaba at the Yusaba's villa, who goes through some documents. Yoshiro Yusaba asks him whether it's about Naoshi Yujui. Arata tells Yoshiro that even though Prince Takahito has asked him to reform the Yusaba's ways as the new head, he doesn't know much about the Yusabas. He asks Yoshiro whether he knows anything about Naoshi Yujui. Naoshi was a problematic child who enjoyed suffering animals, insects, and even his classmates. However, when Sumi, Miyo's mother, reached out to him, he slowly began to change his ways. Naoshi was almost like a bodyguard to Sumi and adored her very much. The narrative then switches to Kiyoka's house, where Miyo Samori asks whether he would like her not to prepare lunchboxes anymore. Since Miyo has seen the commissary, where fresh food is served for the officials, she wonders whether Kiyoka would even like her homemade food. However, Kiyoka says he would love it if Miyo continued providing her with the lunchboxes if it didn't bother her. Miyo Samori is glad to hear Kiyoka's request. The narrative for My Happy Marriage Season 2 Episode 4 then momentarily shifts to a conversation Kiyoka had with his father, Tadakiyo Kudo. He requests his father to take care of Miyo if something happens to him. Tadakiyo is pleasantly surprised to see how much his son loves his fiancée. Following that, the narrative switches to a dream sequence, where Miyo Samori witnesses a moment between her mother and Naoshi Yujui in their childhood. As soon as she wakes up, Miyo wonders why she had that dream. She is irritated by the fact that she still cannot comprehend her dreams. Although Miyo knows how powerful her dream sight ability is, she laments that she still doesn't know how it works. The next morning, Miyo Samori goes to the quarters kitchen to clean it up. Interestingly, Karakoko Janucci lends her a hand. Elsewhere in My Happy Marriage Season 2 Episode 4, Kazushi Tatsuishi visits Yoshito Goto at the hospital. Yoshito learns about the new officer who has joined the squad in his absence.
内薫子が工藤さんの元婚約者候補だってこと。
Samori diligently cleaning the barracks. Just then, she overhears a few soldiers speaking ill of Karakoko, whom they consider inferior due to gender bias. One of the soldiers, who lost to Karakoko in Kendo, harbors a tremendous angst. Even though he knows he cannot win against her, his male pride overpowers his senses. Miyo normally doesn't say much, but she stands up for her friend. She defends Karakoko by asking the soldiers whether it's a lie that their unit operates based on merit, and that women can participate if deemed worthy. A soldier comes forward and rudely talks to Miyo. He tells her how a woman doesn't have the stamina or physical prowess to fight alongside them. Miyo quietly snaps at the soldier, telling him to best Karakoko Janucci in a match before claiming she has no skills. Overwhelmed with shame, the soldier is about to raise his hands at Miyo. Karakoko Janucci intervenes. She tactfully handles the situation to ensure there's no ill scene created. Although Karakoko displays a composed front, Miyo can understand how she truly feels. As such, she invites her to a secret tea party to cheer her up. Karakoko tries some buns and becomes shocked when she discovers that Miyo has made them. She realizes that there's truly nothing that Miyo cannot do. Miyo's generosity and kindness fill Karakoko with happiness, as she heartily smiles. Following that, the narrative for My Happy Marriage Season 2 Episode 5 switches to Miyo and Kiyoka entering an infirmary to visit the injured Yoshito Goto. The hallway, they meet Jaikuji Unanimous, who happens to be Kiyoka Kudo's material relative, a proficient physician and healer. With a friendly personality, Jaikuji introduces himself to Miyo and holds her hands. He observes Miyo's charred hands and realizes she must be working hard at the barracks. As Jaikuji leaves for an urgent call from the ministry, Miyo looks at her hands and realizes the wounds are healed. After that, the duo enters the room where Yoshito is in. Yet, as soon as Kiyoka Kudo notices the bandages on his subordinate's body, he feels slightly off. Kiyoka then makes an excuse to leave the room. Miyo wonders what's wrong with her husband-to-be. Interestingly, Yoshito says he might know the reason behind Kiyoka's sudden change in behavior. According to Yoshito, his father used to be the commander of the Special Anti-Grotesquerie Unit. During that time, Yoshito's father was a close subordinate to Kiyoka's father, Tadakiyo Kudo. He was the first to recognize Kiyoka's supernatural talents and persuaded him to enlist in the unit. Yoshito's father believed that those with power have a duty to improve the world using what they have been given. However, Kiyoka refused to join the unit since he never asked for such power. Year after year, Yoshito's father's abilities weakened. Had he found someone as his successor, he would have happily retired. Yet he pushed on to stick to his ideals. Eventually, one day, he died while carrying out a mission. Yoshito's father's death had deeply shocked Kiyoka Kudo, who was guilt-ridden. From that point, he took up the then-commander's blade and followed his advice to perform duty as the one who had been given power. Yoshito thinks seeing him in bandages must have refreshed Kiyoka's memories. Miyo then apologizes to Yoshito she feels she shouldn't have asked him such a question. However, Yoshito says she should always ask Kiyoka questions. Suddenly, he mentions something about Karakoko Januchi but stops midway. Tatsuishi, who is beside him, says if he's truly concerned about Miyo, he should give her respect by saying it directly. This moment, Tatsuishi reveals an unexpected secret about Karakoko Januchi, was a former marriage candidate for Kiyoka Kudo. The truth shocks Miyo, who doesn't know how to respond. Meanwhile, Karakoko overhears their conversation from outside. She is about to enter the room but stops. Instead, she turns around and runs off. Karakoko thinks her friendship with Miyo was never going to work. Miyo and Kiyoka, returning from the infirmary. Miyo recalls Yoshito telling her about Karakoko's truth. Meanwhile, Kiyoka Kudo apologizes to Miyo for suddenly leaving. He mentions how he wielded the blade after Yoshito's father's passing. Since then, he has been determined to demonstrate his powers for the world's betterment. Miyo, however, still ponders about Karakoko. Eventually, she asks Kiyoka about her. She wonders whether they were in love. When Kiyoka asks Miyo why she thinks it's so, she says it's because Karakoko is a kind person. Kiyoka then firmly holds Miyo's shoulders and assures her that there has been nothing between them. Miyo is the only fiancé Kiyoka has ever accepted. As for Karakoko, he only looks at her as a talented subordinate and nothing else. Kiyoka then apologizes to Miyo for worrying her and not telling her about it before. While resting, Miyo Samori confronts a haunting vision where a glass breaks out of nowhere. Interestingly, the glass shards reflect the worried faces of Karakoko, Mukadayama, and others. Besides them, one of the glass shards reflects No Shiyujui's face. As Miyo tries to reach out for it, the shard injures her hand. This moment, she wakes up in a cold sweat and wonders what the dream was all about. The next morning, Miyo enters the kitchenette and finds Karakoko there. As she begins to prepare some tea for her, Karakoko says she's not qualified to be eating with Miyo. She mentions how she overheard Yoshito telling Miyo about her being a marriage candidate for Kiyoka. Miyo feels she should have still come in. However, Karakoko couldn't do it. According to My Happy Marriage Season 2 Episode 5, Karakoko Januchi truly loved Kiyoka Kudo. However, it was only a one-sided love as she never told him about her feelings. That's why, when she was assigned to the Imperial City again, Karakoko was miserable. Returning to a place with a man she once loved and with people who don't approve of her was a cruel experience until she met Miyo. Karakoko tells Miyo how her kindness endowed her with the strength to push on. Even though she was apprehensive at first, she quickly became friends with her. Even then, somewhere in her heart, Karakoko has feelings about Kiyoka that she cannot get rid of. That's why she doesn't want to betray Miyo since her own feelings are unsettled, then switches to Miyo, who listens to Karakoko's emotional outburst. She gently says that she would hate it if Karakoko made Kiyoka the sole reason that their friendship cannot continue. Miyo reaches out to Karakoko and holds her hand. She says she would hate it if they could not be friends anymore. In fact, Miyo doesn't think romantic love is of higher value than friendship. Hence, she wants to stay friends with Karakoko, her first ever female friend. Miyo Samori's kind words send Karakoko Januchi to tears. Following that, the narrative switches to Arata Yusaba, who is on his way to the Emperor's house. Suddenly, a vehicle hurriedly goes past him. Arata notices Emperor inside the vehicle with some other people. Interestingly, the guards at the mansion are all perplexed. Arata realizes that No Shiyujui has abducted the Emperor. He reports it to Kiyoka's unit, who decides to move out with his team. Kiyoka asks Karakoko to protect Miyo. Interestingly, everything falls according to Naoshi Yujui's plan. He easily infiltrates the barracks and enters the room Miyo is in. Even though Mukadiyama, Karakoko Januchi, and other soldiers surround Miyo, Naoshi poses a major threat.
隊長が裏切ったとでも言いたいのか。
もうありがとう。陣内薫子さん。
Picking up the events from the previous episode, My Happy Marriage Season 2 Episode 6 begins with Arata Yusaba investigating the imperial family's villa. Kiyoka Kudo and his unit arrive at the scene and ask Arata about the situation. Arata Yusaba says His Majesty should be there. However, he's convinced that Naoshi Yujui is involved in the case. Yet, since Naoshi hasn't made contact, they wonder whether they have been led into a trap like Yoshido Goto and others. Kiyoka Kudo senses something is wrong. Suddenly, the Special Anti-Grotesquerie Unit's general arrives at the scene and tells Kiyoka about Prince Takahito's latest revelation, according to which Miyo is in danger. The narrative shifts to the dojo, where Naoshi Yujui chuckles to see such a warm welcome. According to the episode, he intends to take Miyo with him. Meanwhile, Mukadiyama wonders how Naoshi could breach the barrier since it shouldn't be easily broken. While asking him that question, Mukadiyama tries to slip through a paper crane bird as a message for Kiyoka. However, the crane burns as it contacts the dojo's inner wall. Mukadiyama realizes that Naoshi Yujui has tampered with the barrier and trapped them inside. Meanwhile, Naoshi tries to confuse the soldiers with cunning questions. He asks them who let him breach the barrier if it wasn't Kiyoka Kudo. This moment shockingly reveals that it's Karakoko Januchi, who tampered with the barrier to let Naoshi in. According to the episode, Karakoko was forced to follow Naoshi's orders since he captured her father and brutally tortured him. However, one of her subordinates reveals it can't be true since he practiced with the general a few days ago. Suddenly, Karakoko Januchi gets a perplexing thought. She wonders if it was all an illusion, and this thought begins to haunt her. Yet, Naoshi revels at this. He asks Januchi if her memory is truly reliable. Naoshi Yujui extends his hands toward Miyo and asks to go with him. Once again, Naoshi calls himself Miyo's father. Meanwhile, Mukadiyama draws his blade to take down Naoshi. Suddenly, he observes how strangely his subordinates are reacting. The soldiers begin to attack each other as a result of Naoshi Yujui controlling their senses. Some of them begin to see strange grotesqueries instead of their subordinates, while others see the gifted communion's members. At any rate, Naoshi Yujui's gift shatters everyone's senses. Meanwhile, Mukadiyama charges toward Naoshi. Suddenly, his vision transports him to the edge of a cliff. As she momentarily stops, Naoshi plunges a knife into his torso. He reminds the soldier that on the battlefield, a moment of hesitation can cost one's life. After leaving Mukadiyama incapacitated, Naoshi approaches Miyo. This moment, Karakoko Januchi raises her sword against the intruder. Then showcases Karakoko Januchi demonstrating her impressive sword skills against Naoshi. Even though she uses her gift to boost her physical performance, Karakoko poses no threat to Naoshi Yujui. While lying on the ground, Mukadiyama realizes that Naoshi is literally playing with someone as skilled as Karakoko. Eventually, Naoshi grabs Karakoko's arm and slams her against the dojo's window. As the glass shards fall upon the impact, Miyo Samori realizes it's the same vision from her dreams. She regrets not telling Kiyoka about her dream and wonders why she cannot comprehend her dreams. At the same time, Miyo realizes Naoshi would want her, the only dream site user, to the gifted communion. Although Naoshi asks Miyo to join him, she maintains her stance. She also tells Naoshi that he already has a father. Since Miyo doesn't listen to his words, Naoshi reaches for her. Just then, Kiyoka Kudo arrives at the scene and demonstrates his lightning-based ability to stop Naoshi. Naoshi Yujui remains composed and warns Kiyoka Kudo that it's only the beginning. After this, he uses his ability to heighten everyone's senses. Once Kiyoka regains his composure, he realizes that Naoshi Yujui has escaped. At any rate, he approaches Miyo and asks if she's fine. The next day, while investigating the imperial family's villa, Arata Yusuba overhears some soldiers bad-mouthing him and the Yusuba family. They speculate that Arata must have lied about the emperor's kidnapping as one of Yujui's followers. Later, the general tells Arata that the prejudice around the Yusuba family won't disappear in a single day. Meanwhile, Arata Yusuba wants the general's permission to continue the search on his own. As Arata enters the villa, Six delves into a flashback, showcasing his childhood memories. According to the flashback scenes, Arata has always had a lonely life since he wasn't allowed to make any friends. Since it's the Yusuba's duty to weed out the evil gift users, they aren't permitted to befriend other ability users. Moreover, Arata's grandfather firmly believed that Arata had the potential to become the future heir of the Yusuba family. That's why he was asked to work hard and wait for the time when a dream sight user is born. Arata was tasked to become that person's sword. Yet, at present, Arata realizes that nothing has ever happened the way his grandfather predicted. In other words, what Arata truly wants to protect is nowhere to be. Just no Shiyujui appears at the scene. He tells Arata that he understands his situation. That's why he extends his hands and invites him to the gifted communion. Elsewhere, Mukadayama bows his head and apologizes to Miyo for belittling her. He realizes that Miyo truly is a brave person. At the same time, he plans to work on making the organization fully merit-based. When Miyo asks Mukadayama about Karakoko, he says that she is bound to receive severe punishment. However, since she was forced to do what she did, and that she's an invaluable member of the squad, Mukadayama will request a reduction of her punishment. Meanwhile, New Year's Eve approaches. Kiyoka's older sister, Hazuki, hosts a small lunch get-together with Kiyoka, Miyo, Yuri, and Yoshido. Even Arata Yusuba is invited. After the party, Miyo Samori notices Karakoko Januchi outside her house. Karakoko tells Miyo that she will return to the old capital once the investigations are done. That's why she has come to say her farewell. She adds how Kiyoka has negotiated with the top brasses to let her go. At the same time, Karakoko mentions how Mukadayama has requested to shorten her punishment. She realizes with bittersweet emotions that she's truly blessed even though she has betrayed everyone. Karakoko thinks she doesn't deserve to be Miyo's friend. That's why she wants to make up for what she has done, and hopes Miyo will be there for her when she returns. Miyo Samori hugging Karakoko Januchi. She hopes that she's good enough for her, which fills Karakoko's heart with warmth. Just then it begins to snow. The episode ends with some cryptic words from Prince Takahito, suggesting a painful road ahead for Miyo.